We love supporting and promoting the creators of musical theater throughout the world, and we would love to have your support as well. Go to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the Become a Patron button because a supportive community is a strong community. Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanoff. Today's interview, we're going to be heading south of the border. Well, my south of the border. I guess it really depends on where you live, where we're going. But today we will be talking with the Associate Director of the Paper Mill Playhouse. I'd like to welcome to the show Mark Hoebee. Mark, welcome to the show.
How are you? I'm happy to be here.
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you. I start all my episodes and interviews the exact same way. Give us your 30-second bio. Who is Mark in 30 seconds?
Okay, I am currently the producing artistic director at Paper Mill Playhouse, but I started my career back in the late 80s as a dancer on Broadway. I was a dancer on Broadway for about 10 years, working with Rob Marshall. I worked with Bob Fosse, Jerome Robbins, Susan Stroman, and eventually became a director and choreographer, and that landed me in the Paper Mill family, where I joined the staff about 20 years ago. Wow. And then rose through the ranks to become the producing artistic director where I am today.
Fantastic. And we will be talking about Paper Mill, but now you've just made me want to talk about a bunch of other stuff just by saying that. But I want to take it back to the beginning. I do this again with everybody. Were you always in a musical theater, or is that something you discovered a little bit later in life?
No, I discovered it later. I actually was, when I was very young, I was training to be a gymnast and had an injury that now would be considered nothing. You'd be out for just a couple of weeks. Sorry, there's my dog. You'd be out for just a couple of weeks. But at that point, it was fairly devastating. And they said, well, you can't go back to gymnastics. So what happened? Well, I took up dancing instead. So I really didn't get into musical theater till my high school years, and then only sort of as a hobby. And it wasn't until college at Northwestern University that I studied and I really focused my career on it. I started out really primarily as a dancer.
Very cool. So that's very interesting that you started out as the gymnast, and yet an injury for that still allowed you to dance? Like, how did that work?
Well, the truth is, it was a torn meniscus, which now is fixable. We're talking about 1970. And I went to, my parents didn't know anything. I went to a local hospital in Freehold, New Jersey, and the local orthopedist looked at it and said, oh, you got to give this up. I mean, now you'd have a arthroscopic surgery, and then, you'd be back out on the floor in 6 weeks. So it's just a different time.
Cool. So you went to, you said Northwestern, correct?
Yes, Northwestern, just outside Chicago.
And you went there for
I was a theater major. Actually, I got in as an acting major because they didn't have a theater program a musical theater program at that time. So you went, and so that was where I started. And then I had to cobble together my own career as a musical theater major, dancer, and studied downtown Chicago with Gus Giordano and Lou Conte, names from the past.
Nice. So you went to Chicago, and then you moved back to the New York, New Jersey area, I guess.
Well, actually, I stayed out in Chicago for about 5 years after college and started my career out there at a theater called Marriott's Lincolnshire. I got my equity card there, choreographed my first show there, and directed my first show there. And in the meantime, I grew up in New Jersey, so I knew New York, and would fly back and forth to auditions, trying to get my career going. And then I landed a couple of national tours. I actually toured nationally with Camelot, starring Richard Harris. That was the first big national tour I did. And then I did Sweet Charity, Bob Fosse's last show, his very last show, and he died on our opening night in Washington, D.C. That was with Gwen Verdon and Cy Coleman, starring Donna McKechnie. And then after that, I made the move to New York City. So I moved to New York in like the late 80s with my partner, and I moved from Chicago. He had just graduated college. I think we had $1,000 between us. We drove in a car. It's like the most ridiculous story. And like, I was going to be a dancer on Broadway, and he was going to work in network news, and we got to New York, and this is ignorance is bliss, right? We didn't know
Yeah.
anything. I didn't have an agent. I didn't even know what backstage was. I knew nothing. And, but we had a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and we were really young, and we were just following our dream. And fast forward, I became a dancer on Broadway. I
Mhm.
became a director and choreographer. Now I'm a producer running a major regional theater. And my partner, Larry, actually does work in network news. He's the coordinating broadcast producer for CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell and CBS Sunday Morning. So, sometimes when you don't know what might happen,
Yeah.
you just keep an open mind and keep plugging away. And we were fortunate, but yeah, we actually achieved the dreams we came to New York to accomplish.
So that's a great story for all the listeners who are like, ugh, what am I doing? just keep going, because you never know. You might just
Oh,
succeed after all.
it is true. Every day, just get up and put one foot in front of the other, and keep headed towards whatever is on the horizon. The same thing happened back when I first started working at Paper Mill in a leadership position, was back around 2006, 2007, and we had a major financial crisis. We were $4.5 million in debt. The board wanted to close the theater and reconfigure it and start over. And that's when I took over a leadership role as the acting artistic director. And we had about $6,000 in the bank, honest to God,
Wow.
and nothing else. And the same situation. I thought, well, I don't know what else I'm going to do, so I might as well try to figure out how to make this work. And then with a lot of help, from board and very talented staff and artists and alumni. But I didn't know what could go wrong. I didn't know what might happen. So just kept waking up every morning and shaking it off and trying to push the ball forward. And a lot of sleepless nights, but
Yeah.
again, it worked out. You just keep moving forward.
Very cool. And we'll come back to the paper mill and that crisis and all the stuff
Sure.
that's going on. But I'd love to, you mentioned you were in Sweet Charity, the Bob Fosse
Yes.
directed.
Yes.
How was that? Because you said you had choreographed and direct some stuff, and then you got to work with him. How did that influence you, and what was that like?
Well, it was amazing. I had always admired him, and my first, like I said, I never wanted to be in show business. I never wanted to be a dancer or anything. But I went to see the original company of A Chorus Line in 1975, right after it opened at the Shubert Theater, and I didn't even want to go. A friend of mine said, "Oh, my mother's taking a group of students to see this show in New York. Would you want to go?" And I said, "What's it about?" She said, "Oh, it's really fascinating. It's about dancers and their life story and what happens off stage." And I thought to myself, this sounds really boring. But I said, okay, let's go. And I was so changed by that experience.
Yeah.
On the bus, on the way back to New Jersey, I turned to my friend and I said, that's what I'm going to do. And she said, what? I said, I want to dance in the chorus of a Broadway show. And she was like, what? Here you are, you're like 15 years old, you never studied, nothing. So I then started learning about dance. I knew nothing.
Yeah.
And then I saw a bunch of other shows, and I remember seeing Pippin, Bob Fosse's show, and being fascinated by his style. And when I lived in Chicago, they were putting together a national tour of dancing.
Yeah.
And so he came out and auditioned Chicago dancers. And by that time, I just out of college, and so I'd been studying. And so I went to the audition and did really well. And at the end, I didn't make the company, but the company manager called me and said, Mr. Fosse was really impressed and really liked you. And if the tour continues and they need a replacement, we're going to call you. And I was like, wow. So fast forward, I'm on tour with Camelot with Richard Harris. I see this notice for the tour of Sweet Charity that they're putting out. I fly to New York, an open call at the Minskoff Theater, hundreds of guys there. And it's just like the opening of the movie, All That Jazz. I kid you not. And at the end of the day, there were 4 men standing on stage, and I was one of those guys. And Bob said to me, this is crazy, but you look so familiar. Have we worked together before? And I said, well, I auditioned for you. And before I got finished with the sentence, he said, in Chicago. And I said, yes.
Wow.
And so It was amazing. Working with him and working with Bob, Gwen Verdon, Cy Coleman, Donna McKechnie. I was 28 years old, I think, and um, it was amazing. And the tour went out really successful. And then on, our opening night in Washington, which was our third stop, we rehearsed with him all day. We had our opening night. He left we were released. He left the theater, and we didn't find out he died until he died right after our rehearsal. Had a heart attack on the sidewalk out front with Gwen. And they didn't tell us till the curtain came down at the end of the night. And it was devastating. The tour only went on for about another month or so. And I went into a really deep depression because I thought, wow, here I am 28 years old, just having done this incredible project. And I think I peaked. I said, what if my career will never get better than this moment?
Yeah.
And it took a lot to sort of, get myself up and going again. And then I did. And then a year and a half later, here I am standing at the end of an 8-hour day on the stage of the Imperial Theater in front of Jerome Robbins. And I had auditioned, I think 8 different times. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. And okay, I had an answering machine. Remember answering machines?
I do.
With the cassette tape and everything?
Yeah.
And when I left the theater that day, and it was an 8-hour audition, they sent us out to lunch, we came back.
Wow.
And by the time I got home, there was a little red light blinking on my machine, and they said, yeah, we'd like you to join the Broadway company. They had just opened, and they were hiring 4 additional swings because they had 10 swings, and that wasn't enough. They needed more. So yeah, that was my Broadway debut. I was a swing for Jerome Robbins Broadway. I covered 23 men, learned all that crazy choreography.
23 men you covered?
23 men, yep. They've changed the rules since then. They don't let you do that anymore. Yeah. But for me, that was an amazing educational experience because not only working with Jerome and Cynthia and Rubia, Jerry Mitchell was a dance captain at that time. He was my mentor. And, learning West Side Story. I mean, everything, the Jets, the Sharks, the Rumble, because I had to cover everybody. Learning high button shoes, learning the King and I choreography. It was the master class of all master classes for a dancer. So yeah, and then I became known in New York as a Broadway dancer. It's crazy. Crazy. Amazing.
Like you're 15, you decided, and 12, 13 years later, you're there
dancing for Bob Fosse, Bob Fosse and Jerome Robbins. I mean, amazing. Yeah. And then at the same time, I had developed a career in Chicago. I said I started at the Marriott Lincolnshire, and I choreographed a show there and directed a show there. And at the same time, I sort of kept that career going. Mm-hmm. If this had ever been my plan, it would have failed.
Of course.
That's
I was just that way, right?
Right. Every time there was an opportunity, I would say, yeah, I'll try that. So while I was dancing in New York on Broadway, when a show would end, I'd call up my friends in Chicago and say, hey, what are you doing? Do you need a director or choreographer? So I had 2 careers sort of going at the same time. Mm-hmm. And what brought them all together actually was I directed a production of Dreamgirls at the Marriott Lincolnshire in Chicago, which was fantastic. And actually a young woman who earned her equity card at that was a student that I'd worked with at Northwestern, a young woman named Heather Headley, who I think you know. She was Michelle. But anyway, it was a highly successful production, and a producer from a theater in New Jersey called the Paper Mill Playhouse went out and saw it. And they actually hired me to direct their production of Dreamgirls, which I did in 1994. And then all of a sudden I was known in New York as a director. So it was a crazy time.
It's so invigorating to hear stories like this. It's the people that just use the word no and I can't do that, or no, I won't be able to do that, where it sounds like you just said, yeah, I'm going to do this and I want this.
It has been my go-to my whole life, which is to try and stay open and say yes to every experience. And this is what I tell everybody now, especially young people coming up in the theater, but it's the same advice I would give to anybody in any career, which is whatever the opportunity is, even if it's not exactly what you want to do, if it's in the general vicinity, say yes and do it. You
Sure.
never know, get in the room where it happens, right? But get in the room and you will make connections, meet people, find opportunities that will lead you to places that you have no idea where you're going. The flip side is when you get in the room, never burn a bridge.
Yes.
Never, always take the high road, always apologize, always fall on the sword, because the entertainment industry, not just the musical theater, but the entertainment industry is so small and people know each other and your reputation is everything. And if you can be trusted and loyal, I mean, you have to have some talent too, right? And passion.
Yeah.
Opportunities will come your way. And they come through the people you work with because, when I was young, I remember sitting in the hallway at auditions and watching directors come out of an audition room and they would know the producer that was doing auditions across the hall, or somehow I could see that they'd had these relationships. And how did all those people know each other? And it's because when you work with people and you earn their trust and you have successes, you go back to them. You say, let's keep working. Let's find another project. Let's move on together. Because there's so much risk in show business.
Yeah.
But one way you can minimize the risk is by working with people you know and trust.
Yeah. And you just verified what I was going to say. I'm going to be teaching an audition class in January up in Toronto at York University. And yeah, that's exactly the stuff I'm going to be saying.
Yeah.
Thank you for verifying this. So I can say Mark said exactly that.
No, it's true. The other thing I would say about auditioning is it took me many years to understand that. I mean, anytime I was in a dance audition, I was fine. I felt totally confident. But when I had to go in and sing and read, I always felt like that door opened and I walked in and it was a war. And somehow the enemy was on the other side of the table. And I had to win them over and win that war. And then I got on the other side of the table and I realized, oh my gosh, this is not it at all. We want everybody who walks in the room to be great. If we're casting Mary Poppins, we want 7 women who could play Mary Poppins. And I was actually talking to Kate Baldwin the other day, who's a good friend of mine. I've known her since she was, again, she went to Northwestern, as did Heather Hadley, as did I. And she said her attitude is, I walk into an audition room and I say, I know you have a problem. Your problem is you need to cast this role. And I think I might be the solution to your problem. And I thought, wow, what a positive spin to put on an experience that's so fraught with anxiety and pitfalls, right?
Yep.
But yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Once I realized when I was auditioning, it's not me, right? I can give 100, I can do the perfect thing and it doesn't matter. As long as you do what you can, it's out of your hands in the long.
You just got to be as prepared as possible. Go in and do your absolute best. And 98% of the time that you don't book the job, it has nothing to do with what you did in the room. It really doesn't.
Exactly.
But, you don't know that till you've
of course
been through it. You and I know that now.
Yeah, I know. It takes time to realize that and be on both sides of the table.
Yeah.
So you're in New Jersey. You got hired for Dreamgirls. Was that your first exposure to Paper Mill?
Yes. No. Oh, no, it wasn't. This is very funny. My first exposure to Paper Mill was I landed, and I grew up in Freehold, New Jersey, but that's central Jersey, and I never even heard of Paper Mill. Well, I wasn't a theater kid,
Yeah.
So when I first moved to New York, I got hired for a production of Oklahoma they were doing, and I was literally like fourth cowboy from the left. I was nobody, but I loved it. It was a great experience. But when they called me to offer me the job to direct Dreamgirls, I wanted them to think of me as a director. So I didn't even talk to them about that until opening night. And on opening night, I went to Angelo Del Rossi, who was the executive producer, and Robert Johansson, who was the artistic director at the time. And I said, I've worked here before. And they were like, oh, really? What? And I said, yeah, I was in Oklahoma. And they laughed and we shared a laugh. But, you have to be the role you are, right? You have to put on that mantle. And I didn't want them to think of me as a chorus boy, although I was proud of that. I wanted them to think of me as a director. So, but it's a much different thing being, fourth chorus boy from the left, as opposed to being the director of a production. And I had never directed anything on that scale before. And there had never been a major revival of Dreamgirls in the area. So there was a lot of pressure on the production. And I still remember the first day of tech when they handed me the God mic and I was standing, in the middle of that huge 1,200 seat auditorium. And they said, well, what should we do? And I said, well, let's start at the beginning. We'll work our way through. But so that was my first experience there as a director. And then I went back several times to direct other shows. I still performed.
Mhm.
I was, I did Victor Victoria with Julie Andrews and was still, sort of going back and forth. And then between directing, choreographing, and performing. But then I had to, sort of make a leap. I was in my 30s and I said, how much longer can I kick these legs? And a couple of directing gigs lined themselves up. So then I made the move from performer, dancer, to director, choreographer. And then eventually came to Paper Mill through, again, Northwestern is such a through line in my life. Northwestern was offering me a position at in their musical theater department, newly formed, to be the associate chair for the department and eventually to take over for this gentleman, Dominic Massimi, who had been my mentor there. And so I went to Paper Mill and I said, I need an affidavit from you guys about my directing because I don't have enough college level experience.
Yeah.
And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I'm pursuing this job. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get it. I had a young son. My partner and I had adopted a little boy by then. I said, I got to settle down. And they were, Angela and Barbara, like, whoa, wait, stay right here. And they left me alone for like 20 minutes. I'm like, where did they go? And they came back and on the spot offered me a job on the staff at Paper Mill. They said, we think you should stay and be part of this team. And so I went to the Northwestern final interview already with the Paper Mill thing in my back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Then came back and my partner and I sort of hashed it out and said, which job is better? And I don't really like academics. I like master classes and teaching that, but I don't want to do the teaching thing every day.
Yeah.
And so on paper, anyway, the Paper Mill job looked like a better opportunity. And he was working for CBS News at the time. We had a young son. And so that's what I did. I turned down Northwestern and, that's how I started at Paper Mill.
Wow. And when was that? Early
2000.
2000s?
It was the year 2000. Yeah. So, and I was the associate director, kind of associate artistic director, but not with that title yet.
Nice. So now you are firmly entrenched into Paper Mill Theater.
Yeah.
Into the Paper Mill Playhouse. Awesome. And I was reading some information about it. It's over 80 years old. It's the oldest regional theater in the country.
One of the oldest. Yeah, one of the oldest.
So and like I'd like to move on to the what's going on now, but it's gone through a lot of stuff, right? It burned down in 1980, the financial crisis you mentioned. So it's not a theater company that's new to weird crises or problems to get through.
No, and I do have to tell you that in the middle of this pandemic and in this moment, when we went through, so I'll tell you, I started in the year 2000, and then for the first 6 years that I was working there, the theater went through some major changes, right? The artistic director left. The executive producer was retired. Michael Gennaro took over, who was a great guy, but tried to change the vision for the theater, and the audience wasn't ready to go along. And then in 2007, so Michael moved on, and then in 2007, it was discovered that the theater was $4.5 million in debt and poised to go out of business.
Wow.
And so it was a nightmare. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'll say we came back from that. And because we came back from the fire and we came back from the financial crisis, which was our own doing, that this pandemic, as devastating as it is, I feel like Paper Mill has been through this before. Mm-hmm. We have, gotten to our knees and crawled back up again several times. So this is just another one of those stumbling blocks in our journey. But so yes, acting artistic director, $6,000 in the bank and no audience and nothing. And how do you build back a theater?
Yeah.
And so we had some very talented staff who stayed, but at that point we had no marketing director, no director of production. The managing director was leaving. Like people were just running for the hills. And we made a relationship with the Township of Millburn. who bought the property and retired our debt, became our landlords, and we had a little pot of money to start over. And then I said, what should we do? And the board did a national search looking for a new artistic leader. And eventually, that's a long story, but it made its way back to me, which was, an honor. But I said, look, I feel like the audience for Paper Mill is me. I am a theater goer, but I moved back to New Jersey with my partner to start a family, right? Yeah. We still go to New York, but we are a family in New Jersey. My parents live in New Jersey. And I think we want the kind of entertainment that a family goes to see together. And so that our keyword was intergenerational entertainment. What can we provide? Yeah. And then I started calling people and opening up the doors to partnerships. Anybody who wanted to partner with us, because we needed partners. Yeah. And then the big change was that I brought about this new business model through my connections, actually as a dancer and as a director and choreographer, to commercial producers in New York who were looking for a home for the tryout of their new premiere musicals. Now, in the past, no one would bring a new musical to Paper Mill. It was too close to New York. You can't get out of town. You can't get away. Too close. And I remember very specifically, I think it was Shrek opened at the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle. And I remember the next day seeing somewhere online footage from someone's phone of the curtain call. And I thought to myself, that is the end of the out-of-town tryout, because you can't escape it now. Everybody can see it. So we built an infrastructure at Paper Mill. We always knew how to do big musicals and do them well. And we worked over several years to solidify relationships with commercial producers and to birth new musicals. And then our proximity to New York became a huge advantage because it's cheaper. You don't have to travel the company. You don't put them up. Your creatives stay in New York. And that all really came about between two projects. One was we launched the 25th anniversary production of Les Mis, the new production, launched from our place to a national tour that ran for 4 years and wound up on Broadway. And that happened literally because I bumped into a friend of mine in front of Penn Station, and Seth Wenig from Networks. And I said, hey, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm flying to London. What are you doing? I said, I'm getting the train back to Paper Mill. I said, what are you doing in London? He goes, well, we're going to launch the national tour of Paper Mill. Of Les Mis. He goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm producing at Paper Mill now. Why don't you launch the production of Les Mis from Paper? He goes, well, I'll ask Cameron. And he asked Cameron, and that's how that happened. Literally bumping into an old friend. Now, the crazier part of the story is, at the same time, I was in early talks with Disney about a project at a Paper Mill we called the Hush Hush Project, because we would never mention their name, but it was Newsies. And we were in early talks about maybe doing that show at Paper Mill. Wow. And we were, ironing out the details. And it was the morning after Les Mis opened at Paper Mill, I got a call from a friend at Disney who I'd been working on this project with, Steve Fickinger. And he said, well, you have a very good friend who was just in our offices. And I said, oh, who is that? And he said, Cameron Mackintosh. And I'd forgotten that, of course, they worked together on Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Right? I said, well, yes, he was just with us for the last month. What did he say? And he said, well, he said that you guys were a great partner on Les Mis, that your staff and crew and venue is fantastic, and that he can't wait to work with you again. And Steve said, so why don't you come into the office this week and we'll finalize the contract for Newsies. Wow. And that's how Newsies was finalized at Paper Mill. And that's really what put us on the map as this new out-of-town tryout venue, because, within a year that moved to New York, it was a success, ran 2 years on Broadway, national tour, a digital capture, and then our partnership with Disney. That was the beginning of it, but we've done like 5 projects with them. So yeah, that whole business model of bringing the New York new musicals and commercial producers to Paper Mill, the regional theater, that was my creation. But again, I didn't go, this is my idea.
Yeah.
I didn't go, wouldn't it be great if? It was just looking for opportunities and talking to old friends and forging new relationships and doing the work and always doing best and being a good host and all those things.
Yep. And yeah, just don't burn those bridges. Talk to everybody, and you never know what's going to happen.
That is right. Never burn a bridge.
I was reading, like, you've done 15 world premieres of shows. And,
yeah.
And that's incredible. And I was reading, you're going to be, and unfortunately because of the pandemic, you were going to do Bruce, a musical based on the memoirs of Jaws. And I thought it was cool because you had Donna Fiore directing and choreographing it. And
we're still going to do it.
Oh, nice. Because I've seen her work up here in Stratford many times. So as soon as that happens and I can cross the border, I'm coming down to see that show for sure.
She is amazing. And that is a fantastic project about, it's not Jaws the musical, it's about the making of the movie Jaws from the Jaws log by Carl Gottlieb, the fantastical, funny, and crazy story about how that movie never should have even gotten to the screen and became the first summer blockbuster and changed the movie industry.
Yeah.
And Donna is the leader of that. And it's written by the guys who wrote Bandstand for us.
Oh, yeah.
So that was, another collaboration, which, I've known Andy Blankenbuehler. I met Andy Blankenbuehler his first day off the bus in New York. Well, not his first day, but his first big audition. We both auditioned for the national tour of A Chorus Line when the Broadway company closed. He is incredibly successful and a great guy, but I do like to say that I did book the tour and he didn't. But listen,
I was going to ask that.
He's gone on to great fame, but we've remained close and we danced on tour together and stuff. And so he brought us Bandstand, and then the guys from Bandstand, before they'd even finished Bruce and no one had seen it, called me up and said, we have this new project and nobody's seen it and we'd love you to look at it, but it's got to be really quiet. And I read it, and the minute I turned the last page, I called them up. I said, this is fantastic, we got to do it. And how are we going to do it? So we're working with Seattle Rep, co-producing together with Tom Smead's commercial producer from Bandstand, Donna Fiore, who's amazing. So that's a very exciting project that will come after this is all over.
Yeah. As soon as I read that, I went, okay, please open the borders soon, and so I can get down and see some of this stuff. And
it's really fun, really funny, great music. It's terrific.
So speaking of the pandemic, because everybody knows about it, how did that moment when you had to make that decision to shut everything down, was that on high? Because I know in New York the Broadway, what is it, the league? Oh, no,
the league,
Broadway. They decided closing all the theaters, right? How did it work for you guys, that moment?
Well, it was devastating and shocking. I mean, like it was to the world. Paper Mill was poised this past year to have its 8th year of surplus, 8th year in the row in the black.
Wow.
Like you said, 15 world premieres. We had 4 transfers to Broadway, numerous national tours, Hunchback, which we did with Disney and Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz, touring, all over the world. And we had 2 huge shows coming up, Bruce and Sister Act and The Wanderer.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Wanderer. Sister Act was in rehearsal. We were in our first week, and we didn't make the choice. We were shut down. The city closed. Broadway, everybody closed. Yeah. And at first they said, well, it's going to be 2 weeks. So we just put everybody on hold. Yeah. But then it's turned into, what is it now, 9 months? I can't even count. I don't want to think about it.
Crazy.
For us it was really hard because we lost $4 million in ticket income from those shows. We had to lay off 30% of the staff. Our IATSE crew, which are integral to the organization, many of them who have worked at Paper Mill for 40 years, haven't worked since March 13th. And we've had to, reimagine, envision everything about the organization. And we're starting slowly. Look, patrons, donors, supporters, amazing. They came through in droves and helped us last year. Nice. We've also, we have subscribers that are sticking with us. we typically have a subscription base of about 20,000 subscribers, which is pretty huge.
Yeah.
We have somewhere between 10 and 15,000 who have stayed with us. We've just announced a new season, which is mostly digital capture and will be delivered through streaming. But if we can go live next spring or summer, we will bring people back. And we did, crazy things. Like we have a restaurant on campus, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful little restaurant. And Holly Goober, who's the chef, said, once dining outdoors is happening, she started first with meal pickup, selling meals and people pick it up at the curb. And then when outdoor dining happened in New Jersey back in June, we opened the courtyard and put tables out in the courtyard, high top tables. That was successful. We were like, well, what about some entertainment? We built a stage over the koi pond. We had cabaret style entertainment on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday nights. We called up our friends who live in the area in, South Orange, Maplewood. Would you like to come over and sing for 90 minutes and we'll throw you a little money? And then our education programs all pivoted and went online last spring. We have a huge summer musical theater conservatory, which launched the careers of Anne Hathaway and Laura Benanti and Rob McClure, Nikki James. They all came through that as kids. That we went totally online in the summer, very successful. So, this is not the world any of us wants. And this is not, the way I know how to produce theater and not the kind of theater I love to produce. But we all also know it's a moment in time. We are going to get past it. And how do we support each other as artists? How do we keep the theaters, going so that when the health crisis subsides, we can return to doing what we love and what I think the country needs and what people want. But, the arts in general, as you know, are struggling in a major way. And we got some help from the government. We were lucky to get a PPP loan and stuff like that. But Paper Mill and all arts institutions need more help, and artists need help. I have friends who are two actors with children with no career prospect at this moment and have been out of work for 8-9 months. How do you keep going? So, we're all looking toward November 3rd and to see what will happen in our election.
Yeah.
And
but we're looking at that from up here too.
I
think the world's watching.
I have a bunch of good friends in Canada, in Toronto. My friend Jim calls up there, and I hope and pray that the country will make the right decision and that they will fund the arts and the people who really are suffering right now, just till we get on the other side of this.
Yeah. Well, I want to say congratulations as well on what you've done with the theater company despite the pandemic, because you go on social media and everything's so down and sad and angry and unhappy, but it's companies like yourself who, it's bad, but you learn to pivot and you figure it out and you try something different, because the truth is, once the pandemic's done, live theater will come back, but now you have this other thing in your pocket.
Right.
So it's one step back, but it's 2 steps forward for the future.
Well, I think that the virtual world will always be part of our world right now. We have classes online, our education classes. We have students in Quebec. We have students, in Montana, in South Carolina. So we're going to continue that. And even when we come back from the health crisis, some people may not be able to or may not want to come back into the theater. So streaming the productions is going to be a part of the future. We have to get some help from the unions. They need to sort of get a little bit more on board with how to make this possible. Yeah. But you must keep moving forward. And again, I say to you, we've announced this digital season. It's very exciting. We have 7 projects we're doing. We have concerts with Patti LuPone and Laura Benanti and Vanessa Williams, and then these 4 other projects that we're doing ourselves. But like every other crisis, if I told you every T was crossed and every I was dotted at this point, it's not. We're figuring it out. We're going to figure it out. And every day I get up and I say, okay, what are we working on today? And just let's keep looking toward the future. Oh, the one thing I didn't say, and I just have to say it because it's an acknowledgement, certainly not just to me, but to everybody at Paper Mill, staff, board, crew, patrons, educators, students. In 2016, we were awarded the Regional Theater Tony Award. which is the highest honor any regional theater, can get. And it's not something you lobby or petition for. It's something that's bestowed upon you. And it was an incredible honor. And, whenever I'm feeling down, I look to that and I think, wow, we burned to the ground.
Yeah.
We almost went out of business because we had no money, but we have this Tony Award in our lobby. And so you got to keep moving forward.
Yes, for sure. You're the company and yourself, just an inspiration to people because of not giving up, not worrying about if something happens or goes wrong. You got an injury when you were young for your gymnastics. You pivoted, you did something else, you figured out something, you stuck with what you wanted. And it's great and fantastic. And it's something we all need to hear and remember.
And listen, something always goes wrong. It always goes wrong. And if you liken it to a show, right? You plan, you design, you rehearse, you think you have everything in place, then you get on stage and all of a sudden you're like, wait, that's not what I thought it was going to be, right?
Yeah.
Well, everything we planned for, well, that can't happen. So what do? Do we all, shut down and cry? No.
Yeah.
Creative minds get together and you say, okay, well, we can't do that. So what can we do? And sometimes what comes out is better.
Yes.
Better than you planned. So, it's hard. And look, I'm maybe a little Pollyanna and a little, glass half full, but I can't live the other way. And I have my down days too. There's plenty of times that I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? I should have taken that job at Northwestern, but no, I'm kidding. But, and that's when it's important to have people around you that you trust, that you have a love for. Like, I feel like at Paper Mill, it's really a family, and we are fighting for each other and for our community. Mm-hmm. And, we bring them joy, we bring them entertainment, bring them diversion. And now, they're helping us get through this moment so we can get back to that part. That's what it is, family.
Very cool. Well, Mark, thank you so much for spending some time with me and talking about your career in Paper Mill and how can people find out more about Paper Mill Playhouse and the season that's coming up digitally?
You can go to papermill.org, www.papermill.org, and there's all sorts of information about our upcoming season, our education classes, ways to support us. We're all looking for people who would like to see the arts thrive. And, it's amazing that the tiniest donation can make the biggest difference. In the spring, we launched a campaign. We were hoping to raise a couple $100,000 we'd lost our gala. And through small donations, $25, $30, we raised almost over $400,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So it really makes a big difference. Yeah. And if you look, and I say, if you don't give to Paper Mill, give to some other arts organization. Give, because the arts is struggling, I think, almost as much as other, others in worse position. And we're going to be one of the last to come back.
For sure.
So we need the help. But anyway,
awesome.
Looking towards the future, bright days and big shows.
Exactly.
And big laughs.
Now, before we go, Mark, I always ask 3 questions of my guests. Now, there's no right or wrong answers, but there's one wrong answer. So just to give you a heads up and a warning. All right. So question number 1.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite creator or team when it comes to either music, lyrics, or book? What one touches you is your favorite, or just you have a true passion for?
Well, there's so many, but I would have to say Stephen Sondheim is, an inspiration in terms of the depth of his work. But the other musical person I have to call out is Alan Menken. Mm-hmm. Alan, who's a great friend of the theater and a personal friend, and his music sings to me, and I think sings to Paper Mill in a very special way. So I'd be, personally, I'd say those 2 are like biggie in my life.
Nice. Very cool. Correct answers. 10 points. Okay. Or some kind of points. I don't know. All right. Question number 2. Now, if you could be selfish and have any musical staged at Paper Mill, what would it be? Doesn't matter. You just walk and go, I want this show because I love it.
Okay. I'm going to have to say that there will be many more things in the future.
Yeah.
But I think I had one of my most pinnacle experiences actually already, which was a production of West Side Story that I directed on our stage with the brilliant cast. And the reason I say that is because West Side Story was the first musical I was ever in. I played Baby John.
Oh.
Then I played it my freshman year in college at Northwestern. Michael Greif was Baby John when I was Action. Megan Mullally was Anita. It was amazing. And then my Broadway debut was with Jerome Robbins, working with Jerome. And so to be able to get in and live in that show as the director with an incredible cast, it was a pinnacle. But what one I haven't had yet, I don't know. I'd like it to be a brand new musical that no one's even thought of yet, that Paper Mill commissions, and maybe is about a bright light that comes out of this pandemic moment. Someone's vision to say, in the darkness we are experiencing as a country right now, not only a pandemic, but political.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful musical that rose out of it. So we don't even know what it is yet.
All right. So all my listeners who haven't written anything yet, here's your opportunity to get your show into the Paper Mill. Correct answer, another random number of points. All right. So last question, most important question. And as an associate director, it's important to you. Audience members eating food in the theater, yes or no?
Oh, it's tough. Okay. This is my personal thing.
Yeah.
I say no.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I believe, I'm old school.
Yeah.
And I believe when you enter the theater, it is a communal, respectful experience. And it's a conversation not only between the audience and the actors on stage, but among the audience and among the actors on stage.
Yeah.
And if you're eating, you're not only distracting yourself away from the experience, but you're interrupting other people's enjoyment. And I have to say that I saw Bullets Over Broadway with our dear friend Nick Cordero, passed on, and Susan Stroman's show. And my partner and I sat down. I was so excited to see that show. And I sat down, and right as the curtain came down, somebody was late and sat right behind us, literally right behind us. And during the opening number, I hear this rustling of paper, and I'm like, what is going on? And then I am overwhelmed by the smell of like onions and things.
What?
And he brought in this huge submarine sandwich and ate it during the whole first act. So that, I may be a little prejudiced. You can eat quietly, but eat at the movies, eat at the circus, eat at home, right? Eat at intermission, but come to the theater and enjoy the show and enjoy the people who are around you. Right? Yep. It's something we experience together, unlike anything else. So I like to just eliminate those distractions. I think that that dilutes your own experience.
Now put your associate director hat on that wants to make money.
Yeah.
What's the answer?
Yeah, my producer hat says as long and we do allow people to bring drinks and candy into the theater, and especially because, look, we have a huge family audience. And if you're doing Beauty and the Beast and you have, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, you want them in the theater. You want them to enjoy. And so I have no problem with, sippy cups and soda box, juice boxes and candy, because that's what kids need to get through that. Yeah. But if you're seeing a more serious musical, have your glass of wine, but, leave your chips at the door.
Yeah, I'm totally against food in theater, but I also saw SpongeBob, and there was food and kids. Everyone at that point, I'm like, it's SpongeBob, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, I would never say there's no blanket rule. It's not yes or no.
Yeah. Another correct answer. You have 3 for 3.
I'm glad
Congratulations, Mark.
At 1,000.
So again, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me and talking to us here on.
I loved it. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. All right. So that was Mark Hoebee here on Be Our Guest. Tune in next week when we'll be talking to another guest or guests when they talk about their life, love, and passion that is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you. We love supporting and promoting the creators of musical theater throughout the world, and we would love to have your support as well. Go to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the Become a Patron button, because a supportive community is a strong community.